Hello, and welcome to the University of Toronto's RLG 233 Religion and Popular Culture, Group 15's presentation on Pope Francis in Pop Culture. Born in Buenos Aires, Argentina, on December 17, 1936, little Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the non-papal name of Pope Francis, had no intentions of entering the Catholic priesthood. Though originally intending to become a chemical engineer, Jorge would experience life-threatening cysts and pneumonia, resulting in the partial removal of one of his lungs. This was one factor, along with the previous funding of his schooling, which would prompt the future pope to leave chemical engineering and take jobs both as a janitor and a nightclub bouncer. It would not be the life of plenty or high-minded elitism for young Jorge, but a touch of the common man. After entering the Catholic seminary, as well as becoming a member of the Jesuit order, Jorge Bergoglio would serve as Argentina's archbishop and member of the Vatican's College of Cardinals from 1998 until his election as pope in 2013. Latin American popular culture would not be lost in the Pope, who remains a movie buff, salsa and tango dancing aficionado, and of course a committed fan of the San Lorenzo de Almagro soccer club. On March 13, 2013, Jorge Mario Bergoglio was elected by the traditional white smoke from the Vatican's College of Cardinals as the 266th Pope of the Roman Catholic Church and became Pope Francis. Bergoglio named himself after St. Francis of Assisi, a Catholic saint famous for his concern for the poor and pious simplicity, thereby assuming the name of Pope Francis. He possesses the particularly unique characteristic of humility for one in a position of such magnitude. Now, you may be asking at this point, come on Group 15, this is all interesting, but what does this have to do with popular culture? Sure, the religious aspect of this is obvious, and yeah, the Pope likes soccer and Latin dancing, but I'm not seeing the cultural aspect to this. Well, if you've been living under a media or cultural rock for the last few years, let me show you. Pope Francis has become a media icon, not only for his position as the first pope from the Americas, and the first Jesuit pope, but for his unique interactions with the public through various forms of media. According to Thomas Rees, Pope Francis is the most talked about person in the world. He has been on the cover of almost every magazine, he makes the news almost every week, and he is a Twitter and Facebook sensation. Not only does Pope Francis have a verified Twitter account under the handle @Pontifex, the Latin title for Pope coming from Pontifex Maximus, the high priest of Roman religion, he actively tweets on an almost daily basis regarding various issues and currently has a following of more than 8 million, outstripping the US president by almost 3 million. Sorry about that, Barack. Through a strong media presence and an open mind concerning 21st century pop culture issues, Pope Francis has become the epitome of an intersection between religion and pop culture. It is cool to be Catholic. Francis' reputation has partially come through the liberalizing of several conventional positions of the Catholic Church, particularly through his softening towards LGBT issues, allowing for the blessing of children with parents in gay unions, and the encouraged participation of LGBT Catholics. He has been quoted as saying, "Who am I to judge?" when asked whether gays and lesbians could be good Christians, and that all persons, all of us, are important in God's eyes, end quote. Both from Twitter and USA Today. He has also endowed Catholic priests to forgive the sin of abortion for 2016. It is this consistent reaching out through a variety of methods, including modern media, that has enabled Francis to popularize religion for the masses. Along with gender and sexuality issues, Pope Francis popularized the Catholic position on scientific issues such as the Big Bang or evolutionary theory. He has accepted the theory along with modes of thought concerning evolution, expressing that evolution is not, quote, inconsistent with the notion of creation, unquote. He has also openly expressed his views on the more modern debate of climate change, through the writing of an encyclical warning that it is the moral duty of humanity to save the planet from CO2 emissions, or global warming. Not only was the content of this literary piece revolutionary, but his address to the world on the issue through the means of social media has modernized the Church's mediums of communication. His open expressions concerning major issues has awarded him Person of the Year 2013 by Time magazine, the world's #1 great leader by Forbes magazine in 2014, and the nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2014, further solidifying his modern position in popular culture through his high religious ranking. The Pope himself has classified his actions under the umbrella of an Italian Jesuit publication called Civiltà Cattolica. He explained that religious dialogue must be broader in scope and not simply focused on issues such as homosexuality and abortion. Although he has broken through religious stereotypes through his opinion on these issues, he has expanded his scope further to tackle even more controversial issues. Such as a 2013 interview, Pope Francis declared, quote, "I cannot live without people. I need to live my life with others." This might be reflected in his associations with other people in Rome and other places around the world, but also in his social media presence. As part of his social media outreach, the Pope has released an album called Wake Up, actually released this past week on November 27th. Time magazine has confirmed the album, set to release in multiple languages, is ultimately quote-unquote Vatican approved. The songs are written from various excerpts of the Pope's speeches and homilies and is a music and spoken word hybrid, combining Christian hymns revamped by modern musicians and composers with 11 speeches delivered by Francis in Italian, Spanish, English, and Portuguese. As noted by Clausen, the medium of song allows for the quote-unquote spiritual messages as well as the tools to help the illiterate slaves to communicate. These slaves might not just be literal ones, but also those illiterate in Catholic doctrine, piety, or enthusiasm. It is the hegemonizing of the Pope and the Catholic teachings and doctrine. Hegemony? What the heck is that, Group 15? And who the heck is this guy? A young Pope Francis? Well, no, actually quite far from it. This is Antonio Gramsci, the Italian Marxist, theorist, politician, and one-time leader of the Communist Party of Italy. Without getting too much into his backstories, it would be him who came up with the theory of cultural hegemony. Gramsci theorized that the controlling interests in society, whether they be the captains of industry, the leaders of government, or, somewhat fitting for this video, the Catholic Church, would use the means of music, radio, newspaper, or other forms of mass media to communicate their values, doctrines, or beliefs. Most importantly, the method, pop culture, used to communicate these among the majority lower classes would both popularize and normalize these values among them. This was the establishment of hegemonic culture. This meant that the fight to overthrow the bourgeoisie was not only a material one, but a cultural as well. Somewhat ironically for both Gramsci and our friend Pope Francis, Gramsci would use the Jesuits' method of cultural warfare against Reformation-era Protestants as a model whereby Marxists could compete with the dominant culture of capitalism. So, what does hegemony have to do with the Pope? You see, even though he's both softened and been outspoken on issues such as homosexuality, abortion, and international poverty, much of the Catholic doctrine on these issues has not changed. He has been adamant that heterosexual marriage is the only kind of marriage acceptable to the Church, and that abortion is still a sin which needs confession and penance, both of which were formalized in the Synod on the Family this past year in October. Yet, through his media outreach, Thomas Rees has said that, quote, "People overwhelmingly like the Pope. 85% of Catholics and 60% of non-Catholics view the Pope favorably," unquote. Pope Francis has successfully achieved this popularity over cultures not only through his discussion of major issues, but through the way he chooses to communicate, by connecting with today's youth through means of popular culture. As the saying goes, the medium is the message. And perhaps it isn't the specific teachings of the Pope which matter, so much as his ability to tweet, sing, selfie, and Facebook his way into people's hearts. Using the model of cultural and religious hegemony isn't an accusation of a nefarious conspiracy on the part of Pope Francis, something I don't think even Gramsci would accuse him of. It's the acknowledgement that social and popular media remain tools not only for looking up cute pictures of cats or videos of Drake's horrible dancing, but also for the popularizing and establishing of values, principles, doctrine, or in the case of Pope Francis, religious figureheads. Through his varied and consistent use of popular culture to share his messages, Pope Francis has successfully gained the popular opinion of the public, with, quote-unquote, 87 million Americans of all backgrounds who really like Pope Francis, Weddell 2015. And as well, 26% of Catholics that are more excited about their faith, 40% of whom are praying more, and 20% of them are reading the Bible more, many of whom are talking about going back to church. That's also from Weddell 2015. So give it up for Pope Francis. He's modernized the Catholic Church and the office of Pope in a couple of very key ways. Yes, he's liberalized some of the stances of the Catholic Church, even while retaining some of its core doctrines. But more importantly, he's dragged the Church into the information and social media age. By using Gramsci's theories on cultural hegemony, which is the popularizing and normalizing of dominant religious, social, and economic values via popular media, we've shown how the Twitter, Facebook, iTunes, and other mediums used by the Pope to spread the Catholic teachings and doctrine form a very specific cultural hegemony. Clausen also argues that the mediums used to spread the message also allow for those illiterate in either doctrine, belief, or actual reading to communicate their message or adoration for figures such as Pope Francis. Pope Francis is today one of the premier examples of the intersect between religion and pop culture. Good luck, students of RLG 233, and to those elsewhere listening on this today.